Hello guys and gals, and my fellow VEDS-ies. Welcome to day 28 of VEDS 2017. You may recall that a while back I told you guys about how Nickelodeon, and in association Viacom, since they own obviously Nickelodeon, were going to be following in Disney's theatrical footsteps, and to an extent DreamWorks's, and would be producing a SpongeBob SquarePants musical. And, as you may recall, I said it was the stupidest thing that I have ever heard of in my entire life. And that was coming from a person who did back then, and still does to this day, defend Shrek the Musical by DreamWorks. SpongeBob isn't a cartoon that inherently lends itself to musical accompaniment. It is also not the kind of show that really works in a 2.5-hour format, which is what you would typically find the length to be of a Broadway-style stage show. And after a moderately successful run in Chicago, we finally have the cast recording for the SpongeBob musical. And so that, my friends, is why this video has nothing in it. No visuals whatsoever. Because I am here to talk about today the cast recording to the SpongeBob musical, since obviously it hasn't premiered yet, and I don't live in Chicago, so I couldn't have possibly have seen it there. Now, before I get too deep into talking about some of the individual songs and whether or not they work or not, I want to briefly touch upon something that this musical boasts about, and that is, unlike most shows that are put on Broadway where you have one group of individuals that are composing the music and the score, that way they flow nicely and it has a nice consistent tone, the SpongeBob musical went all out, getting a whole group of artists to compose songs for the show. These artists include, and are not in any way limited to, John Legend, Cyndi Lauper, The Flaming Lips, The Plain White T's, and They Might Be Giants. And this is going to lead me into one of my biggest problems with this soundtrack, and that is how some of the songs, I will admit, do sound like they have a consistent tone and a consistent feel, and that they would flow very nicely together and weave a very nice show. You also have songs that are in a completely different style that do not feel like they belong at all, and I'll give you an example. One of the first songs in the show is called BFF, and from what I can tell, it is basically a song about SpongeBob and Patrick explaining why they are the best friends of the world and how nothing will ever separate them, which leads me to believe that in the show they are going to be separated, but that's beside the point. It has a very acoustic tone and style. It even starts off with the strings of a guitar. And then you flash forward a few songs later to what I believe is Plankton's song of the show, and it is a straight-up rap song. And look, I will completely admit my biases here. I am not a fan of rap, so this song to me is already god-awful, but it just doesn't flow nicely with the songs that precede it, or really the songs that follow it. No other song in this show is a rap. It is a one-and-done deal, and I really think that is a misstep. And while, yes, I will completely admit that that is hands down the most egregious example that I can point out, as while there are different styles in the show going forward, they're not as tonally dissonant as that example is. One thing I will say that I was actually pleasantly surprised with this is that some of the songs are actually kind of good. The opening song, which is I believe called Bikini Bottom Day, is so much better than it has to be, and it does a really great job at introducing all of the characters that we're going to see in this entire show: SpongeBob, Patrick, Sandy, Mr. Krabs, Plankton, even Karen of all things. You understand who they are, what kind of person they are, what motivations they'll have, and it is just a really great opening number. Another song that I will say hands down is actually really good, probably better than it has any right to be, is the song Hero Is My Middle Name. Now, just from the song alone, I have no idea where this takes place in the apparent story, but this is a song I believe that is sung by the actors who play SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy, and I believe it is them trying to convince Sandy to help them save the town. Again, I'm just trying to picture this from context clues. But the song itself is really, really good. And I especially love at the end where they're just singing "Hero is my middle name" like 3 times, and there's one at the very end where it goes a little bit vaudeville, kind of classic Broadway. I'm assuming it's going to be like sort of a kick thing. You'll know it if you hear it. They even find some way to weave in Tom Kenny's song from the series called "Best Day Ever," and it actually kind of works. It doesn't come off as too overtly cheesy, and I think that has to do primarily with them changing some of the lines more to fit the story that they're trying to tell, but again, I think it works really well. Now again, I don't want to act like I'm singing the praises of this thing. Not every song here is indeed a winner. In fact, one example that I'll point out, apart from the Plankton song that I had mentioned earlier, is there's another song later in the album that is, I believe, sung by Mr. Krabs and Pearl's actor and actress, where Mr. Krabs is, I guess, trying to tell Pearl the value of money and why money will solve all their problems and how Daddy knows best. I believe it's even called Daddy Knows Best. I have no idea where that's going to fall into the story. Again, it's not a bad song by any stretch of the imagination, but again, I wouldn't say that I'm going to listen to that ever again. One last thing I will point out before I end off my final thoughts on the album as a whole here is some of the songs really do abuse the sort of rotation of the lyrics. A lot of the lyrics to some of the songs repeat themselves multiple times over. In fact, one of the songs, I even like this song, but I think it's more for the orchestration of it. There's a song that I believe is Squidward's song later on in the album. It's one of the last ones on there. I believe it's called "I'm Not a Loser," where if you wanted to play a drinking game for how many times they say "I'm not a loser," "I don't leave the house because I don't prefer to stay at home," or whatever the lyrics are, if you were to take a drinking game, you would be passed out cold within minutes by how many times they repeat that phrase in that stanza. But again, I kind of have to give that one a pass because it's just, it's so vaudeville, classic Broadway, flashy dance number that it's beautiful to listen to, but again, I'm hesitant to say if I like the song as a whole or if I just like the sum of its parts. So yeah, those were my thoughts on the SpongeBob SquarePants Broadway musical cast recording. I know this wasn't very comprehensive, but I listened to it earlier today and I just wanted to get my brief thoughts out there. When I eventually do come across maybe clips from the show, maybe I can give a more detailed sort of analysis of what I think of it thus far, but quite frankly, it's better than I thought it would be, but I would not put it near some of my favorite musicals of all time, like The Producers, or something Rotten, or Hairspray, or even Shrek, of all things. If you guys and gals out there are in any way interested in this particular show and maybe want to listen to some of the songs for yourself and formulate your own opinions, I'm sure if you type in any of the song names that I've listed in this video into your YouTube search bar, they'll probably pop up, because I'm pretty sure YouTube does that whole music thing now, or you could probably go on like Apple Music or Spotify and you'd probably find this album very quickly. But I will say it did exceed what little expectations that I had going in, and hey, it encouraged me to make this. If you have any thoughts about this, comment below, let me know, and until tomorrow, guys, gals, and my fellow VEDS-ies, I will see you on day 29.